morning. Thank you for joining the payment request entry and inquiry webinar this morning. My name is Kathy Blackburn, and joining me today is Kathleen Spencer, our AP manager, Michelle Mooring, our assistant AP manager, and Joanne Callahan. And we will walk you through this payment request matrix, and we'll actually go out and do some demonstrations for you on how to create a payment request. So today, like I said, we'll do an overview of the matrix. We'll talk about payment request changes. Employee reimbursement now is created in the travel and expense module. We'll look at the different payment request limits. We'll do a demo on how to create a payment request and how to inquire on one. And we will show you where our resources are located. So the payment request matrix is a quick reference guide that provides information regarding the different types of items that are eligible to be paid using PeopleSoft payment request feature. The matrix will show you dollar limits, account codes, required files, and give you different hyperlinks with information. There have been some changes for the payment request matrix. Now, all employee reimbursement non-travel transactions are created in the travel and expense module. This would include any student employees also that the reimbursement pertains to their job. So now all employees and student employees, if they have something that should be reimbursed, it will be done through the travel and expense module. There is a separate matrix for the employee reimbursement non-travel. It is also located on the controller's website. It gives you similar things to the payment request matrix. It'll give you dollar limits, account codes, required attachments, things like that. So just keep that in mind as we walk through this today. These are the types of things that you will now see that gets reimbursed for employees and student employees in the travel and expense module. Please remember though that reimbursement both to employees and to students is always an exception. You should always use any other form to pay a supplier directly. You should use a reimbursement as a last resort. It should not be your first choice ever. It should always be your last resort. All right, so I am going to turn this over to Kathleen, and she is going to walk you through the different areas of the payment request matrix.
Good morning. We're going to start with a request type of advances. And we're starting with cash advance, which are funds for educational programs, trips, research participants, and athletic team travel. These are one of the ones that we would like to see you use we have a prepaid card program, and we'd like to encourage you to use this. There's information about this cards at cards@mailbox.sc.edu. So again, this is advanced funds for programs and trips. The account code you'll see on this, there are 3 different codes that are used depending on what kind of expense it is. For the supplier, you'll have to have an employee supplier form, and also when you fill out your payment request, you'll need a cash advance form attached to your request. There's also a advanced procedure for settlement information on the controller's website. You do want to review that and be familiar with that procedure. Our next type is a travel advance. This is for students only, and it's for funds for the purpose of business travel on behalf of the university. Employees need to do this through the travel module, so travel advance for students only. The student will need the travel advanced form, and also this travel advance will have a procedure for settlement information. The student wants to be, or the person filling out the request needs to be familiar with the settlement information. The next type of request is individuals for reimbursement. And again, we're stressing these are not employee reimbursements. Employee reimbursements now go through the travel and expense module.
We do have a question.
Okay.
What about reimbursement for safety work boots?
Is that reimbursing an employee for safety work boots? That's my question back.
Yes.
So then that would go through the travel and expense module. That would just be an employee getting reimbursed. Okay.
Okay. The next one we're talking about are reimbursement for supplies and fees. Again, it's a student. We encourage you to use the department purchasing card so the student does not come out of pocket. But if you find that you need to fill out a payment request for this, you'll need to match your account code with the expense when you're filling it out. And the student will need to give an itemized receipt and also proof of payment. With proof of payment, sometimes the receipt will show proof of payment. Other times you may need a copy of a bank statement showing the student's name and the expenses come through, or a credit card statement. For reimbursement for food, again for students, these are meals that have to be in conjunction with their job. You always want to use the food code. You also want to make sure that they have an itemized receipt, proof of payment like we talked about, a food approval memo, and a list of attendees. All food purchases are approved in AP and then are sent to purchasing for additional approval. Next are for memberships for students. These are memberships that are a necessary part of their job and are also a benefit to the university. They will need an itemized receipt attached, and they will also need a membership justification memo. And this will explain that the membership is reasonable, justifiable, and necessary to the benefit of the university and not just for the student's benefit. If you look in the special instructions, this will show you the approvals that are needed for this.
So we have a question. Can cash advance be used for search committee meals?
No, it should not be used for search committee meals. I don't think I've ever seen search committee meals. No, I would say no. Usually it is a program or a participant or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Our next one is reimbursement. Let's see, we did membership, so we'll move on to petty cash. And this is reimbursements to petty cash. And these are made out to petty cash because it's for miscellaneous purchases that couldn't be purchased with a card. You will need to have a user code that matches your expense. The supplier will be the petty cash custodian, and it will need itemized receipts. And also, if it includes a food purchase, you will have to have a food memo as an attachment as well. Any moving or relocation expenses are no longer processed through the payment request avenue, and that is because there were changes in the regulations with the IRS in 2017, and these reimbursements are now taxable, so they are dispersed through payroll. If you want to look at the new policy, that can be found on the website, on the controller's website, and any questions can be sent to moving@mailbox.sc.edu. Our next payment request type are for individuals with specialty payments. The first of these are royalties, and royalties are payments made by one party to another in exchange for the right to use intellectual property or physical assets for work which is copyrighted or patented. You'll see on the account code that there is a separate one for international, and that's true with your supplier. A W-9 would be local, but W-8 is used for international. What you'll need as an attachment will be the royalty agreement and amount calculation, and these can be department specific, or you can use the form that is provided on the controller's website. In the special instructions, you'll see that if you have more than 10 recipients, you can use an AP upload spreadsheet. Directions for the AP upload spreadsheet can be found on the controller's website, but we will also be doing a webinar next week for AP upload spreadsheets. Our next one is participants, and here participants are individuals that are that are paid as an incentive to take part or participate to research studies, screenings, programs, or surveys to gather information. These can be, we have a new program that is a prepaid card, which the card can be prepaid but can also be reloaded. And so we're kind of trying to encourage you to use these instead of a payment request. And again, information about these cards can be found at cards@mailbox.sc.edu.
And there will be a webinar for that as well in March.
In March, yep.
So as you're working with these, there are 3 different codes. 2 of those are for the participant costs themselves. The last one is for the online provider fee. So as you fill this out, your attachments, you'll need to attach a program memo that outlines the program and the dates. And this doesn't have to be participant specific. The same form can be attached for all the participants. And you'll also need the Institutional Review Board, the IRB approval attached. And again, these, if you have more than 10 participants, you can use the AP upload spreadsheet. Stipends are payments made as a one-time or periodic payment for scholarship or fellowship. They've got 2 codes, one that is specific for international. You will need the stipend form and also the approved contract or agreement for scholarship or fellowship. Again, 10 or more, you want to look at the AP upload spreadsheet. Next, we have honorariums, and these are payments made in recognition of acts or professional services for which custom or propriety forbids a price set. That means that there will not be a contract or an invoice. So as you work through those, you want to attach the honorarium form. We also have an honorarium that is specific for international. This will be the same. It will not have a contract or an invoice. And your attachments, you're going to need the honorarium form, but you also need an international support approval form and a copy of the passport and entry stamp. You might also want to note that the supplier form is a W-8 and not a W-9. Our next payment request type are contractual services. And contractual services have several account codes, so you're going to want to make sure that you match that to your expense. Also, each code has a different purpose, dollar limitation, and required documentation. So when we're talking about contractual services, the first one, it has the dollar limitation, as I said, and these are under $10,000 for the type of service. There are various account codes, and you'll need an invoice. But remember that we're talking about services. So if you have multiple payments for the same service and they exceed $10,000 for the year, this will need to be on a purchase order and not through a payment request. The next is legal payments, and these are for legal services, and they have to be approved by the legal department. So as you're working through your attachments, you will need to have the invoice, but you also need to have that approval from the legal department. Next, we have annual maintenance renewals, and these are payments for annual maintenance, such as software or hardware, and this is a one-time annual payment. These required the invoice attachment. Next is study abroad. And this is payments to entities who provide accommodations for study abroad purposes. You'll need an invoice or a department-specific detailed form. You'll also want to attach the program leader expense form and a foreign per diem rates that shows US dollars in the Appendix B. Please note that if it's group food on a trip, this should not be on the program leader expense form. It needs to be a separate payment request using the food account, and it will be routed to purchasing for additional approval. Our next request type are supplies. And again, with supplies, we encourage you to use your purchasing card, but if you find you need to use a payment request, you'll notice that there is a dollar limit under $10,000, and you'll want to attach the invoice. And here, you need to make a note that we can't pay from quotes or estimates orders or statements, it has to be the invoice when you attach it. So be careful that when you're attaching that it is an actual invoice. The next are dues and fees. And dues and fees require using a purchasing card unless it's not allowed. The first of these are subscriptions that are not library. That's when you have a subscription to print or web publications. And it requires an invoice, as most of these do. Next is membership dues. And these are membership dues that we're paying directly to an entity for organizations that benefit the university. You will need to include your membership renewal form, but you also need to have a membership justification memo. And this memo will explain why the membership is reasonable, justifiable, and necessary to the benefit of the university and not just to the benefit of the individual. Our next one is licenses and fees. And again, these are licenses and fees that benefit the university. You'll need an invoice or the licensing registration form, and you'll need the certification memo. In the special instructions, you'll see this includes purchasing tickets. So if tickets are part of an event, such as theater tickets or zoo tickets, this is where you're going to code them to licenses and fees. Next are registration fees, and these are for attendance at a conference or meeting that benefit the university. You'll need your invoice and you'll need a registration form. A couple of things to note here. One is that the registration can be paid to the supplier prior to the event. If you're looking for a reimbursement for registration, you will need to go through the travel office. Another thing to note is if the registration form needs to be included with the payment, you need to let us know that. And the way that you let us know that is in the comment field as you're filling out the payment request. That way we'll know to look for the attachment and to send it when we send the payment. Next are sponsorship fees, and donations are also coded here. And this is payments to organizations for assisting with conferences or meetings. The invoice or the sponsorship form will need to be attached. Next, we have Department of Homeland Security, and this is on behalf of incoming faculty. The application form will be needed to be attached, but also a memo for justification. And the memo for justification has to be approved through the International Support Office. Our next request type are fixed charges and rentals. These also have different dollar limitations, so you want to be aware of that as you start to fill out your payment request. Our first one is insurance, which doesn't have a limit, but this is insurance for purchase of insurance for the university, and we'll have to have the invoice or the renewal notice. Next, we have rentals, and this does have a dollar limitation of under $10,000. It's payments made to entities for one-time rentals, not reoccurring rentals, but just one time. And this might be for a conference space or AV equipment, and it will require the invoice. Next, we have hotels, and these are payments that are made directly to the hotel on behalf of travelers conducting business for the university. You'll notice it does have a dollar limit of under $10,000, and it will need an invoice. And if there is a TA number that is on file with the travel office, you please attach that as well. Our next payment request type is food and catering. And this is food not for individual reimbursement, but actually paid to the entity. So it would be things like caterers, the grocery store, and for restaurants. You'll notice the dollar limit is under $10,000, and the attachments that you'll need will be an invoice that is itemized, a list of attendees, and also a food memo. Our next is utilities. And these are payments made to utilities for monthly things like electricity, water, sewer, cable, satellite, and telephone. There are various codes, so obviously you want to match the code, the account code to the expense. These are paid from monthly statements. That's what we use as the invoice, and that's because that's what is normally sent. It's normally a monthly statement. If at all possible, you want to use your P card to pay these, but if not, certainly send it through a payment request. For larger utility payments for 10 or more, again, you want to use your AP upload spreadsheet. And also just make a note that we pay monthly statements, but when we do, we are only paying the current charges on that statement. The next type we want to talk about are department-specific payments. So these are codes that can only be used by these specific departments. So the first one is the bookstore. And of course, this is just payments made to entities for bookstores across the campus. These don't have a limit. They do require an invoice, but also if you've got a credit memo, that needs to be attached as well. And then a note needs to be put in the comment field that a credit is attached and needs to be processed. That just helps us as we're going through and makes us aware that the credit memo is out there. The library is the same way. This is for library books, subscriptions, and materials across campus. It requires an invoice, but also if you've got a credit memo, we need to know that in the comment field, and we also need to have it attached. Next is School of Medicine physicians. These are payments to physicians on behalf of the School of Medicine. They've got their own code and will need an invoice attached. The School of Medicine also has preceptors. So these are payments to staff that function in the role of preceptors and will require an invoice. So with payment requests, we're continually reviewing payments to see if they can be in the payment request module. So if you have a payment and you think that it would, you'd like to have it analyzed and reviewed, please send us that information to accountspayable@sc.edu so we can review it and see if it is eligible to be submitted on payment request. It's also important for you to realize that it takes us about 7 to 10 days to approve payment requests after they hit our queue. You can find information for payment requests, the matrix, and other information at this link, which takes you to the controller's website and under accounts payable. When you follow the matrix, you need to make sure you're attaching all the necessary and required documentation. The matrix is what we use when we're reviewing your payment request. We use the matrix. So obviously, you know, if you are using it, then it should come through easily. So be sure to attach your required documentation. Be sure to use the matrix to identify the allowable payments. And if you're not sure, go ahead and reach out to us and let us help you through that. As you're working through them, if we've got questions, we'll send you a payment message. And if these go unanswered, then we will deny them just so that we've got time to kind of figure out what's going on and resolve any problems. So next we're going to walk through how to create a payment request.
We have a question.
Okay, cool.
You mentioned 10,000 for calendar year per vendor for same services rendered. What about same vendor but different services are being provided but no single request exceeding 10,000?
So you want to make sure that you're not violating any procurement rules. So if it's the same service, same vendor, and you go over 10,000, then you're required to have a PO. If it's a different type of service, then it would be a different type of thing. But I would always check with purchasing to make sure that you're not required to have a PO when you get close to that $10,000 amount. AP definitely is looking, so if you've got the same service with the same vendor and you send us $5,000 in the fall and then January rolls around and you send us another invoice for that same type of service and it's $3,000, and then right before year end you send us something else that's another $5,000, well, you've just violated the procurement code because that full amount should have gone through a purchase order. So if you have questions, please reach out to us. We'll reach out to purchasing also. or just go directly to purchasing to make sure that we follow that code always. Okay?
We have another question. I made hotel reservations for the presenters at our literary festival. We are paying by payment request to the hotel. Do I still need to do a TA for each presenter?
Yes, yes. Anytime you're required to have a TA for a non-employee, you're required to have it when we're making that hotel, because we want to know that that's already been pre-approved, and you need to put those TA numbers in that payment request, because whenever AP gets something that deals with travel, AP is going to forward that to travel, and they're going to be looking for those TA numbers. Great questions. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, let's walk through how to create a payment request. So your navigation is going to be main menu, employee self-service, payment request center. And once you get to the payment request center homepage, you'll see that it's divided into 3 sections. In your top left is your request summary area. So this is going to show you a count of the payment requests that you have created. The top right section is going to show you messages. So the messages that you get from payment request approvers are going to be here, and those are the ones that will need your attention. At the bottom, there is a listing of the payment requests with detailed information that is specific to each request. So from here, you can add or edit or view or cancel requests. So from here, this is where you're going to want to hit the create button to start your payment request. So on the first page, there is a step-by-step activity guide, and this is just so that you can see where you are in the process. So there are 4 basic steps. The first is the summary, the next is supplier information, invoice details, and then it gives you the opportunity to review and then submit. So on step 1, the first thing we're going to do is put in the invoice number. Now the invoice number should come directly from the invoice, and if it is in caps, you want to put it in caps. If there's a hyphen, you want to use the hyphen. We want it to look exactly like it does on the invoice. This allows us to be able to find it should we need to look for it for information. The next is your invoice date, and this too should be exactly as it is on the invoice. If you are working through one and you have one without an invoice number, you're going to want to use the date, your entry date, and also the supplier's name or the last name of the person. And the same goes for if there is no date. You want to use the date of entry. Next, we've got description hired, but I do want to mention the attachments, because this is where you're going to attach the documentation for your payment request. So you'll click that and it'll bring up a box, and that box will allow you to add an attachment. It'll allow you to browse through your files to find it, and then you will upload it. Once you have your attachment on, then you want to look at the description. And this description should match your matrix. So you want to have the type, and then the type of payment request, and then the description, such as libraries/books. The next thing we're going to do on step 1 is to fill out the amount section. So with the amount section, if this is a reimbursement, then you want to enter your amount only in the cost subtotal. You do not want to break out miscellaneous, freight, or tax, because we're just paying them back what they have already spent. So for reimbursements, just the full amount goes in the cost subtotal.
And I just want to stop right there. So remember that we really should not have many reimbursements now go through payment request, because all employees and student employees now go through the travel and expense module. So if you are just reimbursing a student who is not an employee, then this would apply to that.
Now, if you are working on a supplier invoice, you want to enter the cost subtotal, which is less tax and freight. And then you want to be sure that you've entered the tax and the freight separately. And finally, in the notes column is where you would put special instructions. And this is where you would, if you want it held for pickup, you want to say, please hold for pickup. When you do that, if you will put a name and a number, that helps a lot, because then we can just give you a call and tell you that it is ready for pickup. Also, if you have an attachment that you want to go with the check, this is where you want to include that. So our next step is step 2, and it's for your supplier information. So as you can see, there's a place that says country. So if it is not the United States, you want to search for the country that you are trying to pay, and then select that country. When you're searching for the supplier, searching by name is much more reliable. So you want to put the name in and then hit your search. So this will bring up a list of suppliers. And as you're looking through that list, you want to be very careful to make sure that you are selecting the correct supplier, but also the correct location. This is very important, obviously, because we want to make sure we're paying the correct supplier. Next step will bring you to the invoice details. And here you'll see that the information from step 1 should have been pulled over. So you want to look at it, make sure that all that information is there. And if it is not, you want to make sure that you enter it. You want to look at your amounts and make sure that looks correct. And once you have verified all of that, then you can hit the Add Lines button. And when you add lines, what you're doing here is adding your accounting information. You're going to want to start with the amount, which is going to be that cost subtotal. Once you've entered that, you want to move to office location, and you'll want to use your lookup to find your office location. Use the description field, and that will help you narrow your search. Next, you're going to enter the accounting detail, and everything that you need to enter will be on this line. There'll be the amount, your operating unit, your department, fund, account class, a PC business unit if you have one, and project and activity. There is a scroll bar here that you can use to the right and the left so you can see all of the fields. And also note, if you need to charge multiple accounting lines, there's a plus sign that you can hit, which will add the line so you can add additional information. When you do this, your lines will need to equal your original line amount that you entered. If you've done this and you get a chart field error message, this is something that you will have to address before you can move on. It may be that you need to use the conversion crosswalk. You can also, if you've entered it and you know that it's valid, then please give Accounts Payable a call and we'll work with you on that. The next page is your review and submit page. And the first thing you want to do here is hit save for later. You don't want to submit yet, because once you submit, you're not going to be able to correct anything. So hit your save for later button, and then you want to hit the review button so it'll bring up your review screen. So on your review screen, this gives you the opportunity to make sure that your invoice number is correct, that your invoice date is correct, that everything looks like it should. It also gives you an opportunity to look at your supplier and the address. In the bottom portion, it's going to give you the opportunity to look at your accounting information, make sure that looks correct. And once you've looked over it all and you feel like that it is correct, you want to hit your return key at the bottom, and this will take you back to the page where you can hit submit. After you've clicked that submit button, it will take you back to the Payment Request Center homepage, and you can see where your request is, and you can look at its ID and keep track of its status and view the details. If you'll notice, when you do this, you will not have a red pin next to the line because you've submitted it. So that means you cannot edit it. The only way it can be corrected is if one of the approvers sends it back to you. So now we're going to work through one together. Okay. So we're going to go to main menu. We're going to go to employee self-service and the payment request center. So again, this is the page that's got 3 sections to it. Let's see if we can get it so you can see it. Okay. So as I said, you can see what you've got pending and your messages, and we're going to go to the button that says create. And this is our first summary information. So here we're going to enter our invoice number. And we want that exactly as it is on the invoice, and then our date. And our description, and in our example, we're purchasing supplies. And then we're going to note that this is paper for the lab. And our total is $108. However, 100 of this is the actual supplies. And then we have $8 as our tax amount. And then in our notes, we do want to pick this checkup. So we're going to ask them to hold for pickup. And we're going to include a name and a number. And this is where we're going to add our attachment. So you'll want to click on the attachment, and this will bring up the attachment box. Here we want to add the attachment, browse for our documents, and here are our documents. So we'll double click and upload. And so now you'll see it gives you a chance to put a description, and you just want to use a description that you will recognize. And hit OK. And there you can see that we have added 1 attachment. So we're ready to move to the next step. The next step is the supplier information. So we know that this supplier is in the USA, so we do not need to search, but we could. This is what that looks like if you're searching for another country. And then we're going to put in the supplier name. And our supplier is Paper Handling. And we're going to hit search. And here we are. And here again, you want to look at that address and make sure that it is matching your invoice and that this is the correct supplier. So this is, and we're going to click it to select it. And then we are ready to move to the next. Now here is Invoice Details, and this is the chance for you to look again to make sure that all the information is pulled over correctly, your invoice number, your invoice date, your amounts, that you put the cost subtotal correctly and broken out your tax amount. If all these things look right, then we're ready to add some accounting detail. So this is what this box looks like. And we're going to start here with the line amount. And of course, that's just the 100. That's what the cost sub amount is. And then our office location. For us, our office location has 613 in it. We're going to look it up. And when you're looking things up, it's usually best to use contains, not begins with. And so for ours, our office location and then And here we are, this first one's 1600 Hampton Street, 613. So we're going to add that one. And then we'll move on. Our amount again is 100. And then our particular business unit our department fund code. And this is your account off of your matrix. And then our class. And then you want to look at it again and make sure that you've got it. And then once you're happy with it, hit OK. Oh, and this one gave us an error. I believe we need an extra 0 in our fund code. Oh, also, here we didn't come over to an activity or a project, but you can use this scroll bar so that you can see all of the entry. So now we're going to do this again because we've corrected our error. And you'll see on this page, here's the red pen that's telling you that you can update it at this point. So you'll want to double check it there as well. So now we're ready to move on to the review. So now we're looking at the review page. Here, again, we want to hit Save for Later first, because that makes sure that we have an ID already assigned and also that we can make any corrections. So after we've saved it, we want to hit our review button. And here is our review page. So again, you want to look at the things. Your attachment is here. You want to make sure your invoice number, your invoice date are correct. Your notes or comments are as you would want them. Double check your supplier again. And just look through it, look through your account coding, your amount. And once you've looked at it and you feel comfortable, then you'll hit the return button. And this will take you back to the page where you can now hit submit. And once you submit, here you are back at the Payment Request Center, and you can see that here is the very first one is your request that you have created. As you move down the line, you can see you have the option to review it. So if you hit this, you can see what you've submitted, and then this will show you the approval flow, so you can see where it is in the approval. So that is how we do that. So next we're going to talk about how to inquire on a payment request, how to find one that you've already entered. So our navigation is going to be accounts payable, and then review accounts payable, and the USC payment request inquiry. This will bring up a screen that gives you lots of options on how to find a payment request, but you definitely want to use your date, because this will narrow it down for you. And then in this instance, we're going to use our operating unit. So the payment request page will give you 3 different sections. In your top left, it's going to show you the count of the payment requests by status. And then it'll also give you recent messages in the top right. If you look through what is available, it'll give you your request ID, your entered on date, your supplier ID, and the name of that supplier, your invoice ID, your description, your chart field screen. If you used a business unit or a project ID, it will be here, and your total, and then your request status as to whether it's pending or approved, canceled, or denied. And also there'll be a voucher number or a voucher ID listed if a voucher has been created. So now we're going to work through a payment request inquiry. And you're going to go to main menu, accounts payable, review accounts payable information, USC payment request inquiry. And so here we are on the screen. We know we want to narrow it by date. And then, like I said, we are going to look by operating unit. So here you are on the request inquiry screen, and you can see how many are out there, how many new, how many are pending. And also, you know, it'll give you all the information that we discussed, and at the very end, whether it's been vouchered, whether it's pending, and also gives you the page where you can review what's in there, so you can look at that particular request and where it is in the approval process. Okay, we want to make sure that you know that there are several resources for you. The payment request matrix can be found on the controller's website under accounts payable. There are also payment request entry, and the PowerPoint presentation that we're doing now, that will also be able to be found there. On the PeopleSoft resource page, the inquiry and the entry and inquiry webinar, this will also be on there. And also there's a tutorial in video form for both the request entry and the request inquiry. If you have additional questions, you can use the support contracts page, to determine the appropriate department to email your question. Do we have any other questions?
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you have a great rest of your day.